That'll work too. Hi, my name is Jason Buffington. I'm a Senior Technical Product Manager in the System Center team at Microsoft. And today I am honored to be joined by my good friend.
I'm honored.
Gordon McKenna, who is a Microsoft MVP and Operations Manager. Now, you're going to actually keep me honest because you actually deploy this stuff for a living, right?
I do deploy it for a living, yeah.
All right, so we're going to have a good time for the hour. So this is the first of, depending on how you count them, 4 or 5 different Operations Manager 2012 topics that will be covered over the course of the week. This is the overview of what is new in OpsMan 2012. So what are our goals for today? The goal is just to tell you what's new. And hopefully by the time you leave this session, you are as excited about that as we are. The 2 big things that I hope you take away from this session is what Ops 12 is trying to do around helping you with your mean time resolution. How quickly can you resolve whatever your error status or performance conditions might be? And then lastly, or secondly, or perhaps even more importantly, depending on how you look at it, it's about raising your visibility. As an IT pro, raising your insight as to what's actually going on within your environment, which of course has always been the pane of glass that OpsMan lives in. We think we've done a bigger job even making that even better in this next release. All right, as a couple disclaimers, we are not yet at public beta and therefore not quite shipping yet either. So these screens and these features are all, of course, subject to change, enhancement, and elaboration as we go all throughout the hour. All right, give you some context. Now, of course, if you're in this session, we're talking about System Center Operations Manager, but when you look at that bigger picture of where System Center has been and is going, you'd have to go all the way back to 1994 at the beginning of time, when System Center Configuration Manager, or what was then SMS, actually first came out. You know, I was actually certified in SMS 1.0. I'm sure it hasn't changed much since then, but okay, maybe just a little bit. All right.
Just slightly.
Now, in Windows, in 2000, of course, we got MOM as part of the equation from that, and then the story keeps on getting better. Usually when I'm at Tech Ed, I usually get to speak about Data Protection Manager. We started doing that in 2006, and then VMM, and then Service Manager, and of course, AviCode. The story just keeps getting better, but the story is the same story. It's around management. It's around how do we keep the other stuff that you rely on up and running effectively. All right, so we're going to change the lens now. In Operations Manager's case, this is more of an abbreviated view to kind of help us see what Operations Manager has been doing all along the way. All right, starting back at MOM 2000, right?
Yep.
And that's about when you got going with the product too, right?
Yeah, well, I actually got going with it a little bit earlier than that. So I used to work for a little Texan-based software company called Mission Critical Software, who originally bought a product called Sentry Enterprise Event Manager, which then became OnePoint Operations Manager, and then NetIQ bought Mission Critical, and then Microsoft stepped in and bought Operations Manager. And
we all lived happily ever after.
We all lived happily ever after.
All right, exactly. So let's look at how many people are now using this. First of all, we want to say thank you. For those of you that are in the room, 52% of you are actively already using System Center Operations Manager today. Well, actually, I should say 52% of the Windows users on the planet. Show of hands, who in here is using Operations Manager today? 2007 or R2? Okay, that is way more than 52%. So thank you so much. So a couple other stats for you. In 2010 alone, we had over 100,000 management pack downloads from System Center. Statistically speaking, over 50% of all environments are actually using System Center today to manage their environment. 33% of the Microsoft users actually consider System Center to be their primary lens that they manage the environment through. And this is actually one of my favorites. It probably applies to you as well. There's over 175 ISV partners that are all developing technologies around System Center, including Infra. Right?
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
So it's a 5-star product.
It's a 5-star product. That's right. Okay, you should be in marketing. All right, so Operations Manager, let's kind of get into this. So we've got this rhythm where about every year or so we're giving you something else. When you look back at MOM 2005, really the story we were telling was, how is your server? Right? It was a very server-centric model. In 2007, we released Ops Manager 2007. It was really more around the app, or it started to be anyways. How is Exchange? How is the service? Now as we continue on, OpsMan 2007 with SP1, we start getting things like interop with other enterprise-type solutions. In R2, we added cross-plat. In 2010, we bought something called AviCode. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. And so here we are. So we've got this kind of this regular rhythm of what's being happening for an evolution. So as far as what we're here for, what we're actually going to talk about today, in Operations Manager 2012, as I mentioned, the two big goals for us were around raising IT Pro visibility, giving you more information and a better lens as far as how your environment's functioning, as well as reducing your mean time to resolution. And the themes that our developers used when we were actually going through the Ops 12 release is really around four big ideas: simplification, reliability, personalization, and consistency. So we're going to talk about each of the new enhancements in Ops 12 using those as kind of our main lens, or what our North Star is for the product. Okay, and there's three really big ideas. One of them that we're going to talk about today is around reducing total cost of ownership for your infrastructure. And we're going to talk a lot about what's changing in the topology in order to make that more effective. We're going to talk about what we do to give you a more holistic view of the health of your environment, not just around the server, not just around the service, but really around the infrastructure as a whole, really the fabric of your private cloud. And then lastly, we're going to talk about some of the new things we're releasing around simple and powerful virtualizations, or visualizations, actually of virtualizations, in fact. All right. So let's go through the first one. I think this was you.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. So reduce TCO management infrastructure. So we all want to do that. We all want to reduce the cost of deploying our infrastructure. We want to make it easier, more simple to be able to manage as well. So simplifying the topology elements is a key aim of 2012. You know, lowering that hardware cost, lowering that maintenance cost, lowering the cost of having to configure the product in general. Reliability is another key factor as well. We want it to work better. We want it to have less blackouts. When we're upgrading, we want to have no blackouts. We want a seamless upgrade from Operations Manager 2007 to 2010. So anybody in the room have MOM 2005 at some times in their life? Anybody run that? So, just a couple. So the upgrade from MOM 2005 to Operations Manager 2007 wasn't the easiest in the world. So being able to make that very smooth and seamless and keeping that existing investment, not losing any work that you've done in that as well. And, that brings me on to consistency as well. We want to see a consistency in the data that the platform is providing us. We want to be able to trust that data so that we know it's telling us the right things about the environment that we're monitoring with it. Okay, so let's talk about the topology. So 2007 R2 today, what does that look like? Well, we have this concept of a root management server, which is the first management server that we deploy in our infrastructure. And then we scale out that topology by putting in more management servers or gateway servers if it's in non-trusted domains. And our agents talk to these management servers. And then for high availability, what we can do is we can put this root management server component on a cluster, on a hardware cluster, which gives it resilience, gives it that failover. And why is it important to do that? Well, there's a number of key factors that make that decision to go towards high availability. So this root management server role today in Operations Manager 2007 provides all our console access. So our operator consoles, our web consoles, they all connect to this SDK service that we have on the root management server. Our alert notifications. If our root management server goes down, we lose some of our alert notifications that are going on. Also as well, connectors to other management systems. So if we're connecting to another management group or we're connecting to a heterogeneous platform, if we lose that RMS, we lose that connectivity, so it's very important. And finally, health aggregation. For those of you that build distributed applications, one of the key features in Operations Manager 2007, the RMS is the single point where we check on the health of all the objects in that model. And again, if we lose that root management server, we lose that kind of health aggregation. So, the way that the way that we move towards that is we cluster the root management server, and that just gives us that high availability stack. And once deployed, it works very well, and it does what it says on the tin. So what challenges does this root management server introduce? Well, most of you that have deployed Operations Manager will understand these challenges only too well. So performance and scalability. Obviously, the overhead of having to put clustered hardware, there's an expense attached with that. And there's also, large hardware that we have to put in to be able to support that. Also, things like memory we have to look at and disk I/O on that root management server. And also as well as the kind of high-end hardware spec, you know, we have to have that whole management of the cluster. How does that fit in with our existing kind of management in the environment? So there are some big challenges. So how are we going to deal with that? How does that change in Operations Manager 2012? Well, you'll be very pleased to hear that that root management server single point of failure concept has gone away. So I think that's a very significant step forward. And we have out-of-the-box HA with 2012. So it's a single step that we have to take to provide that high availability. So how do we do this? Well, we install a management server like we would in 2007. And, you know, we've got now the ability, because it is just a management server, lots of you out there will have management servers today running on a virtual platform. And you might have made the decision, because of the cluster element, to put your root management server on a physical platform. So we've got the ability to run these components on commodity hardware today. And how do we scale that out? Well, we scale that out by just putting more management servers in. So no single point of failure. And then our workflows run against the management servers in this group. And if we lose one of our management servers, what actually happens is we don't lose any of that console access, we don't lose any of those workflows to health aggregation, because quite simply, another management server just picks up the load instantly and carries on, and our consoles will connect to that other management server. So it's a massive improvement in the way that we deal with that high availability element.
Now, before we go any further, one thing we do want to draw your eye to, this is intended as the overview session, so we're going to give you little pieces and parts of what's new in Operations Manager 12. If you look in the bottom right-hand corner, we've got several other sessions coming throughout the week. We've gone ahead and noted if some of these topics are really interesting to you, you're going to want to note which sessions are actually going to do that. Rob Kufis tomorrow is going to do an entire session just on setup and configuration, where he's going to really tear about these slides and quite a bit. And throughout the session, you'll see other codes in that bottom right-hand corner. That's going to be where you're going to go see the rest of your depth throughout the week.
Yeah, and Rob Kufis is the man on this stuff. So if you're interested in that kind of hardware, in that topology area, then definitely go to that session, because it's a must-see. So let's look at some other elements around Operations Manager 2007 topology. Well, anybody do network device management today with Operations Manager 2007? Okay, a few people. What about cross-platform management? Anybody diving into that with R2? A few people again. So again, in this instance, we pick a management server today that our network devices or our cross-platform devices talk to. And again, if we lose that management server, then we basically lose connectivity to those network devices. And, you know, this can be a problem in kind of scaling this out. So in Operations Manager 2012, we introduced this concept of a management server pool. And this means that my network devices or my cross-platform devices, rather than them talking to a single management server, I can have them talking to a pool of management servers. So again, if I have that issue where I lose a single management server, my devices automatically fail over to the next management server in the pool. And I scale this out by simply adding more commodity hardware or virtual platforms into that group. And, you know, the more high availability I want, the more platforms I can add to this management pool. So it's a much more effective way of being able to manage your devices and your cross-platform devices, and it makes the whole platform a lot more scalable in the long term. So when we talk about reducing the management infrastructure, you know, the total cost of ownership of the management infrastructure, we're talking about moving from, you know, the multiple steps that we have today to set up high availability in Operations Manager to a single step setup of high availability on commodity hardware. Quite a massive step, I think. And also, we introduced the support for automatic device monitoring failover as well, which makes that a lot more proposition. And when we talk a little bit more about the network device management advancements that we've got in the product today, you'll understand a little bit more where that fits in also. Jason.
Okay. We are actually in a pause state on the Hyper-V server, so why don't you go ahead and keep on going for just a minute, and I'll bring these back online.
So let's take a look at the second element that we have here. So the holistic view of application health. So, you know, I work with a lot of customers out in the field, and the biggest thing that they're saying to me that they want is dashboards. You know, we all live in a world where we have offices that are full of big plasma screens, and people want to see dashboards on that. And it's always, you know, been difficult with Operations Manager to build those kind of dashboard views that all personas in the business want to consume. You know, and actually, as a consultancy, I've made quite a nice little profitable business creating dashboards for customers who don't have them. So I'm very pleased to talk about the new dashboards in Operations Manager 2012. And what these enable is this 360-degree view in a single tool. Also, as well, reliability. So the reliability of information enables us to make sure that the information that we display in our holistic views is actually accurate and reconciles with the actual end user experience. So some of you will be familiar with the synthetic transaction capabilities that are available in Operations Manager today. How do we really take full advantage of them and bring them into views that can represent our application from end to end? Also, personalization is another big thing that I hear from customers. They want the ability to be able to personalize the views so that they can have multiple users within the organization consume that. We have our tech support guy, for example, who's one persona. We then might have our service or our app owner. That's the second persona that we have to deliver up to. We've then got our executives, our CIOs, our CEOs. That's a different type of view, but we want that view of the same data. And finally, you know, consistent views across multiple instances. So when I go out and I do dashboards today for customers, I'm creating a distributed application model in the console. I'm then maybe using a third-party product like Vision Live Maps, for example, or the Visio snap-in that's available from Microsoft to create another view for service and app owners. I've then got the service-level dashboard, which gives me an SLA-type view. That's something that I create in SharePoint. Again, that's a load of work that I do. And I've even started creating views in Performance Point now for application and business users as well. So, you know, lots of different views in the same console, but in different areas. And one of the big things, and I think you can probably touch on this, that we're doing in OM12 is bringing them together in one place.
We are. Now, before we actually start bringing those together, though, I also want to make sure that we're talking about what new kinds of data we're actually going to be seeing within the environment. So let's talk more about that 360-degree view that, that Gordon has kind of introduced for us. Again, if you think about how our evolution has gone on, we first started talking about Operations Manager 2007, now with SP1, we had this lens where we're really still looking at health models, but it was really very Windows-centric. In 2007 R2, we added things like Oracle support, some cross-plot, et cetera. And so what we're adding now, the bigger picture of that view, how that view actually gets bigger is really full-fledged view of what the network health is, as well as .NET distributed applications and Java-based apps as well. Here's kind of the punchline. Up until now, when you've used Operations Manager, you've used it on looking at it on a per server, on a per type of application kind of basis. With Operations Manager 2012, the whole idea is to kind of give you that lens of what's underneath, meaning the network of the fabric, as well as the distributed application layer, which is sitting on top of that. So you can really kind of wrap the entire picture around. So it's not just about the servers, it's about the entire fabric of that private cloud model. Now to do that, what Gordon talked about with the 360-degree view, we're going to talk about network monitoring and application monitoring, give you those two different lenses for that. All right, so the first one I want to talk about is infrastructure monitoring. So from a network perspective, the way that's going to work is we now provide full SNMP and ICMP monitoring of your network-based devices. Now it's going to have multiple vendor support already included, multiple protocol already mentioned. And honestly, instead of slideware, this is one of those that's just too fun. You really just kind of want to demo it. So let me kind of jump in here. Actually, before we go there, I'm going to resume this box for us really quick. Okay, we'll say resume on that.
It's quite interesting, you know, getting the number of hands there for network monitoring, because just a very few people in the room that are doing it today, and you know that's probably reticent of you know the kind of capabilities we've had up to now.
Actually, I have another theory. Out of curiosity, raise your hand if you're an IT pro. Okay, keep your hand raised if you're normally a server-centric IT pro. Okay.
Wow.
Now put your hand down. Raise your hand if you're typically a network person.
Wow.
Okay. Thank you both for coming. So, you know, And it's not uncommon that typically there's a lot of people in different roles. You were telling me about one company where the two guys, they're like offices away from each other and they never spoke.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's a typical thing. I think, most companies now have a separate network team that, sit away from the server team. And, when a problem goes down, it's never the network, it's always the application.
Or vice versa.
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
So. All right, so let's kind of talk about how this works. So since the majority of you raised your hand as far as using Operations Manager today, you know about the concept of run as accounts, and so we go ahead and discover the different workloads and different machines in your environment, and if we have proper permissions, we'll start monitoring them. Well, network-based management actually works very similar to that. We have this concept of community strings. So we can look down here actually in this graph, and I've actually already put in a couple community strings in the environment. Now, what will happen then is I can go ahead and define network discovery rules to say, go and find a range of machines, and if any one of those community strings actually gives me valid access to that device, I'll start using it very similar to how I use a run as account for permission for authentication. So once I've done that, my normal discovery kind of patterns will kick in, and what I'll come back with is a big list of IP addresses. These are now devices which Operations Manager has discovered, we've been able to successfully authenticate to, and now these are going to be managed within my network environment. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch over to my monitoring pane. And from here, now notice that this is just traditional Operations Manager. So as I drill down into this, here I can see my network-based devices, and I'll go ahead and expand that out for you. This is a lot different than managing networks in the 07 environment. And from here I can go ahead and see, okay, here's all the routers in my environment. Here's all the switches. Now notice, by the way, if I can get this a little bit bigger for y'all, I've got some Extreme, I've got some Cisco, I've got some Foundry. Again, very much a multi-vendor based model. And for the folks that, that raised their hand earlier and said, hey, I'm the networking person for my environment, chances are, if you're managing Cisco in your environment, you've got Cisco tools already, right? And if you're managing Foundry, you've got some Foundry tools. And if you're managing Extreme, you've got some Extreme tools. So there's already a variety of tools. The whole idea is not necessarily to displace all these, but really just to kind of give the server-centric IT pro a better view into the rest of the environment. So let's do this. We're going to go ahead and open up one of my devices. And how about we go into, let's go ahead and take a look at, oh, that's the Health Explorer. So from a Health Explorer perspective, it's simply going to give me information about the availability of it as far as performance as well. Let's shrink that down. Oh, my test pane, that's why I'm not seeing it. I shrank that so you guys could see it. Now I can't find it anymore. There we go, network dashboard. All right, so one of the things we do is in the new dashboard features is this thing called a vicinity view. And I got to tell you, vicinity view is probably one of the coolest things in Operations Manager 2012. So it's refreshing right now. We can see the scroll bar. So here you can see on this left-hand side, this is a map of not only the network-based device that I wanted to manage, but also, and if you can look right here, everything within 2 hops of that particular device. So it's actually going to start stitching this together. We use this concept called port stitching. And here's the fun part. What I'm going to click on here is the part where it says show computers as well. Remember, Operations Manager hasn't lost sight of all the servers in my environment. So I know all the machines, I know their IP addresses, I also happen to know their MAC addresses, and by the way, I've got all my network devices as well. Let me hold the questions for the end because I want to make sure that we have time for them, but absolutely we will make sure we cover that. So here's what we've got. We've got this concept of port stitching where now I can actually see not only the Windows-based devices in my environment, I can also see how they're connected to each other as well. So if I have a problem where my server isn't functioning at the speed that I want or my app isn't functioning, I don't just have to say, hey, you know what, I think it's the network. Or maybe it's the app. And I don't have to have the finger pointing between the server person and the networking person instead. So here's where it gets kind of fun. And we actually arm wrestled for who got to do this demo, and I won. So we're going to go into navigation. So I've gone ahead, I've right-clicked on one of the devices. So I've got a couple Windows servers here. I want to find out what's going on. And I'm going to go ahead and go into the network node of that environment. And now I'm going to be looking just at that particular switch. And again, I've got some good availability here. Now, you want to take a look at what we're showing here? So yeah, tell us about this.
Yeah, so what we're diving into here is we've got the average response time, we've got the process usage. So this is all the SNMP data that we're pulling directly from the switches. And if we go down, this is one of my favorite views. We've got the health of the interfaces on that node as well.
So on a port level?
On a port level, yeah. And I think this is the one, if you right-click and look at the node diagram, we'll be able to kind of drill into each of the interfaces. Now, to me, when I'm monitoring devices, that's the important thing to me. I'm not really concerned about end-to-end what's happening from one switch to another. I'm concerned about what's happening between my network interface on my server and the interface on the particular device. So this is the view that is going to tell me that that network switch in that location is down. And this is the view that I'm going to throw at that network guy and say, hey, go and deal with your switch, it's down. Yeah, and here's your proof.
You're going to say please when you do that, right?
Of course.
Okay, great. Yeah. So let's go ahead and go into one of those interfaces. We'll go a little bit deeper and go straight down into the network interface dashboard. Again, this is also a good chance to show the new flexibility that's in the dashboarding as well.
Yeah.
So now here we are. We're all the way down to the performance at an interface point of view. And again, this is still just straight operations manager. So we're going to actually see what the send and receives is. We can actually see the instance. Let's go on down. How many packets, how many bytes, how many discards for network errors. And this is just going to keep on going down. So it's a great way to actually get some great insight into what's actually going on in your environment.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is exactly the kind of information I want to know. Inbound, outbound, network utilization on those interfaces. You know, if my users are complaining about the application running slow, you know, I don't need the ability to drill down all the way to the network layer. I'd need to be able to understand what interfaces on the switch are causing that. So again, I can go back and maybe do a little bit of load balancing, or I can get my guys to give me an upgrade on my switch. So that's the important data I need as a server and application and service operator.
Absolutely. All right, so let's go back. We've got lots more things we want to make sure that you show today. So one of the things we showed you from a networking perspective is the vicinity dashboard. And again, there's this concept called port stitching. And oh, by the way, there is a complete hour on just networking. I would love to actually spend that hour, but I guess I lost that arm toss. But yeah, so SIM 354 is our networking session. You're going to want to make sure you go and see that. I believe that's on Wednesday as well. So that's part of the answer. So Operations Manager is still giving you a view of all the servers. Now we've looked at the network, which is underneath it. So now what we want to do is actually look at application monitoring. We're actually going to look at the distributed applications which are running on top of my server infrastructure. Now, there's a couple things there. There's Java. And from a Java perspective, one point of note is that we're monitoring the Java-based servers which are running on Windows. And that includes things from WebSphere, WebLogic, JBoss, and Tomcat. But there's also .NET. And in .NET's case, it's not just about what you've already seen from Operations Manager. It's actually courtesy of a recent acquisition we made called AviCode. Now, the purchase for AviCode was done very late in calendar 2010, and this really was a case where, you know, in some cases, Microsoft would buy a number 2 or number 3, just depending on, you know, what the business is like or how it competes or how it complements our current scenario. AviCode really was undeniably, you know, number 1 when it comes to .NET-based monitoring. So what we want to do now is kind of walk you through .NET-based monitoring and AviCode. Now, by the way, for those of you that are System Center Suite customers today, you have use rights. You can go and download AviCode. And by the way, there's 3 sessions just on AviCode here this week. So you can go play with the hands-on labs. You can go to those sessions as well. What we're going to show you today is AviCode 5.7, available today, running on top of actually Operations Manager 2007 R2. And then I'll talk to you about how that's going to be folded into Operations Manager 12 by the time the product ships. You want to take us through the demo?
Yeah, please. So I've got a quick question. So how many people have in-house developed .NET applications in the room? Okay, so a fair few numbers. So how many of you people have a close and loving relationship with your .NET developers? About a quarter there. Yeah. So, you know, a
little less. There were some people that raised their hands.
So, you know, it's an interesting thing. It's kind of like that network team relationship. You know, I've been working with AviCode for a long while, long before Microsoft bought it, and I've quite often got developers and support guys together, sat together, and these guys work a couple of benches away and yet have never spoken to each other. You know, they've exchanged hot emails, but they just don't have any kind of relationship. And again, it's that kind of blame mentality that you have. You know, my application's running slow. It couldn't possibly be the code. It's got to be the infrastructure that the application's running on. So, you know, what AviCode brings to the table is really the ability to be able to identify exactly whether performance and availability problems with a .NET application are related to infrastructure or security, or whether they're related to code-based problems. And I'll talk a little bit about here. So some of you may be familiar with this because there was a little bit of the AviCode in 2007 in the .NET monitoring pack. What Microsoft have done is gone out and bought the full product. And what we've got in our management pack template view is a couple of new extra elements here. So we've got the...
Let me jump in. So before we go into actually how this is developed, one key thing that's really important to realize is that, at least in our experience, and we'd like to hear if your experience is different, often the biggest problem with monitoring a distributed app is because the developer never got around to adding instrumentation. Right? So now maybe that's not true. Does all of your developers, they always add all that instrumentation, the troubleshooting and documentation? Okay, maybe
no,
just
zero.
And me and the guy in the front row, we're like this. So the whole idea is part of the problem is usually we don't have enough instrumentation to actually measure the environment. Well, .NET actually provides us a good part of that. It gives us a lot of the entry points, right? So then the other part of the story is AviCode's management packs can integrate or plug into those entry points within .NET, and that's really what gives it. So the punchline here is that because your production servers that are running those .NET-based applications, they already have everything they need. We're simply going to deploy the AviCode agent on top of the Operations Manager agent, and everything else is already done. We're not having to force the developers to change their behavior, although it might be nice if they did. Yeah. We're just plugging in and actually getting that instrumentation that we need.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Let's see how that works.
Absolutely. Retrofitting of instrumentation to .NET applications. That's music for most people's ears. So let's look at how we do this now in the console. So I'm just going to run through a little wizard here, and I'm just going to basically, I'm going to see if I can discover and add some monitoring to some .NET applications in here. So I'm going to click on this Find Now. And what I've actually got here is wherever I've got an Operations Manager and an AviCode agent deployed, it's gone out and found those .NET applications or websites or web services that are running. And what I can simply do here is I can actually just pick any one of my websites. And what I've then got is a discovery rule that's been created, and I've got a discovery interval, and I can choose to put this in a brand new management pack, should I want to do that. And basically what I've got is some monitoring thresholds. So, as Jason said, we work at a very low level within the .NET application, so we work at the CLR level. So we're basically capturing exceptions that are being created from the application. So I can put an alerting threshold and a sensitivity threshold around those .NET exceptions that I'm collecting from the application. I can also choose, and you notice these are selected for me, to actually do some performance counter collection as well. So I'm picking out 4 of the top most common performance counters that I want to collect around a .NET application. I've also got a custom counter list. So if I want to add my own custom counters to that, and quite often that's something that you'll find in the environment, there's other counters that you might need, or there might even be some custom counters that have been written. And also you can see as well that it's choosing, by default, to just collect connectivity and security related alerts, and not performance. But I do have the option to do that if I want to dive into the performance element of that as well.
So I want to make sure we unpack this. So the whole idea here is on the top of the screen, we're identifying the thresholds for how sensitive we are to watching the environment. In the middle of the screen, we're configuring how often we're going to build historical data against these given applications. And that's going to allow us to actually build an SLA and actually understand how that application is behaving over time, in this case, every 5 minutes. And then the fun part is on the bottom, right, in the monitoring view.
Yeah, totally. So you can see at the monitor view, automatically I'm going to create a monitor which is going to monitor exceptions that are coming out of the CLR of that .NET application or web service. And I'm going to say that if the exception events exceeds 15 seconds, and I'm looking at an average request time of 10,000 or 10 seconds in there as well, then that's going to produce an element. So I'm setting a baseline for my particular performance counter. And again, I can go in and I can add a number of different elements to that as well. And if I click on Next, and this is the bit I love, I can actually go in and I can add my own transactions. So in the first bit, I'm just looking generally at my .NET application, and I'm doing a general collection of events overall across all of my transactions that I'm collecting. But here, I can go in and I can actually choose to pick individual transactions. And I love this bit because I can actually go in and I can pick individual pages or transactions that are occurring within that app. So, if I'm worried about the authenticate page or the login page, I can simply go in and add that as a separate element that I monitor under the overall monitoring of the app that I can do. And you can see that I can add that. And quite typically, what I do with customers is we'll start to plot all of the transactions that are occurring and the important ones, so I can monitor down to a much deeper level in there as well. So finally, I get a summary, and then I can click on Create, and what that's going to do is that's going to go ahead and set up that monitoring. I mean, how easy was that? That was 4 or 5 clicks, and I'm away monitoring my .NET application. Now, what I've actually got on here, Jason, is I've got a .NET website that I built earlier at home. No, I didn't really.
You didn't really? Yeah.
No, I wish. So, and this is actually called Dinner Now, and it's an application that brings together all the local restaurants and allows you to choose food and select menus. Ah, okay. So.
Your page is broken.
So
what are we going to do?
We're going to start the database because actually the database isn't running at the moment.
All right, let's fix that first.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, so we've got a little, let me get that back up and running. We don't want to actually have it too broken. We actually want to have it a little bit broken, so we'll go ahead and bring that back on online. All right, so now we've got our database, which is up. Now notice what happens here. So immediately, yep, wrong window. There we go. We go back in. Now, if I reset this, I'll be able to actually see the database is online. I'll know this because I actually have working data here. All right, so now what we've got is I've got this Dinner Now application. I'm a Joe user, right? And so it's time for me to go ahead and actually work my app. So first thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and sign in. And just to make it easier, I've got a card pre-built that's got my authentication credentials in it. I'll go ahead and log on to Dinner Now. And now, and admittedly, I skipped lunch, so I'm going to be actually looking forward to having some breakfast. I'm going to go ahead and pick that particular winery. Maybe that's not my best choice for lunch. And then I'll go into my shopping cart, and here's an error. All right, look, there's all kinds of different errors that you're going to get as part of this environment. Now, of course, if I'm Joe user and I see this, what's the first thing I'm going to do? As Joe end user, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a screenshot of this, and I'm going to write down what the error code is and exactly the list of steps of what I was doing so that I can then call the help desk and let them know exactly how they can reproduce this condition right.
Of course you are.
Absolutely. That's what end users do. No, what end users do is they close it, right? And then they call the help desk and say, Dinner Now is not working. How do I get this back up and running again? And of course, if we're talking about a business-to-business site, now we're going to have some problems where they may actually go to a different provider instead. So tell us instead what the real experience looks like.
No problem. Well, there was actually 2 things went on there. We had that database down. And, you know, if you think about that, if that's an e-commerce site that's bringing me in my bread and butter and that database is down, I want to know about that. But, you know, am I necessarily going to know about that? I mean, are all my users going to report that's down? So I want to know instantly. And, you know, if I'm already running Operations Manager in my environment, I've already got notifications set up. I can already get my team actively. I might have ticketing off there as well. So what we've actually got here is for my Dinner Now application, and you can see there just, so it's not smoke and mirrors, there's my little SE viewer view there. So you can see there's my transaction, and it's automatically created on the back of that little application. It's created a view, and it's not quite come in, and it's created a view for my transaction. So just to show you the results of that wizard. But I digress. Going back to my Dinner Now state summary. So what I've actually got here is I've got a head-up display of what's going on with my .NET application. So I can see a couple of little performance stats there, average request time, monitor request performance view. And down here in my alert view, you can see that I've got a number of .NET events that have come in. So I'm just going to pick one of these out here, and I'm going to open it up. And you can see it looks and feels very much like a standard Operations Manager event. I've got my kind of product knowledge in there. It tells me actually what's going on in there. You know, I've got my history pane. But the important one for me is this alert context. And this is where we start bringing in the true strength of AviCode into the product. Because what I've actually got here is some information about what's actually going on when that page has actually gone down. So I can see that I've got my Dinner Now default page there. I've got the full application path, the process thread, the CPO queues. And if I click on this little link here, I can go right into my AviCode development console, and I can actually see a little bit more detailed information. So this is the intercept viewer that comes with AviCode. And this is where I can start drilling in and grouping together problems. So I've got performance problems that I'm looking for there. And you can see that I've got a problem there with my menu search service. And I've got another problem there with my menu types. And if I drill into one of these, I begin to have a little bit of a development type view about what's going on in the environment. So I can open this up here, and I can actually see the SQL query that's going on underneath the covers. I can view the stack trace there. I can also view similar events that have occurred around that application failure. And I can drill into particular date streams there. I can look at related events that have occurred. And I've got this nice distributed chain view as well, so I can see what's going on from when my user clicked from one bit to another. And then finally, and I love this screen, I can get a head-up display of the performance counters that are occurring. Do you remember we talked about, is the problem being caused by a server-related problem, or is the problem being caused by a code-related issue? Well, I can actually go in here and start to plot things like average request time and exception events, and start to have a view, an overall view of what's going on at the platform at the time. Okay, so a lot of really nice information.
Now I want to stop here. So earlier we had a poll, and we said that most of the folks in the room were IT pros. Here's the trick. The whole idea around adding distributed application performance monitoring to operations managers to give you, the IT pro, a new set of language to have with to have a conversation with your developer. Now, in fact, some of the examples that you showed us earlier with SQL calls, I will tell you, I am a traditional server-centric IT pro. I am not a DBA. I can barely spell SQL. And I'm not a developer, right? But now I can actually sit down with those folks, and I can actually say, look, here's the problem. It's somewhere, I can actually show you where a SQL query says, I do not have permissions based on this application. So then you can actually have that meaningful conversation between the developer, the database guy, and you. Because ultimately, as the IT pro, you're most often the person responsible, or should I say liable, for that application or that service actually running, even if the other two folks at the table are saying, hey, it's not my problem, it's not my problem. Now we can actually talk about whose problem it really is.
And, you know, so how are customers using this? Well, I've got a customer that I'm working with in the UK that's a TV broadcasting house. And they've got an application which sits on the back end of a reality gaming show that they've got. And it's really important for them that this application's up during certain times. So they switch this monitoring on, they go very deep, and they're able to respond very quickly to issues that are occurring in there. I've got other customers who are actually using this as a QA type tool. So, you know, before .NET apps are put into SharePoint or before .NET apps are put into their web environment, they run it through this and they just evaluate whether there's any problems in the code or whether there's any problems with the infrastructure that's supporting the code before they actually put it into the production environment. So it actually opens up a whole different type of monitoring, and it actually goes into a whole different audience. You're actually dealing with developers. So, you know, we talk with the network topology how we're kind of now getting our feelers out into the network world, and now we're getting our feelers out into the developer world. So this really is, you know, the true themes around 360 degrees monitoring.
Absolutely. All right, so let's kind of go back again. And what Gordon and I showed you, we talked about out-of-the-box application discovery. So, in fact, one of the things I liked about the demo was when Gordon went and picked the service that he wanted, SE Viewer, I think was the one that you actually picked. He didn't say which server it was on. He just said he wanted to monitor the app. Regardless of how many instances of that app there are, regardless of how many servers it actually sits across, that's all exposed within that same view. The whole idea is to actually be able to give you an easy-to-view understanding of how the application's actually working, or in this case, not working. And then also being able to actually have that meaningful conversation with the developer folks. Again, remember, one of our core tenets here was around reducing your mean time for problem resolution. All right, so far, we've covered reducing TCO through the topology changes. We've covered giving you a better view of your health, both from the network layer below as well as your distributed application layer above. And so now what we want to do is we want to talk about visualizations. And by that, what we talk about is custom dashboarding. Again, our core driving factors around simplicity, around how to actually make those dashboards easier to use. You actually mentioned earlier how that's actually been a complex task for you in the past.
Yeah.
Personalization for actually giving different dashboards to different users. And in fact, you're going to tell us a story about that in just a second. And then also consistency. So Gordon, tell us a little bit more about some of the dashboard pain that you've seen, or not pain, but the experience that you've had with dashboarding, and then we'll go ahead and jump into the next demo.
Yeah, not a problem. I mean, some of the big things that I see out in the field is that, you know, quite often we have different views or different panes of glass for different people in the organization. So we might have one view that the that the tech support guys are looking at. There might be a different view that the application owners are looking at. And then we've got a completely different view that the CIO is looking at. And, when application issues occur, everybody's shouting about different problems. And really, what you need is one consistent view with different types of layers that look out into the different environments.
Okay, so let's talk about that. So you have an application problem,
yeah,
and something goes wrong, and we get this little red X. I always hate the red X. Does everybody need to see the red X?
No, not at all. For example, a CIO, quite often, how many people have SLAs for their applications for performance and availability? Quite a few. If you haven't, it's not that difficult setting SLAs with the business. For example, if I've got an SLA for 99% availability or 95% availability, then my CIO, who I've agreed that SLA with, or my CEO, or whoever my executive is, he only needs to see the application when it breaches that SLA. So if I'm fixing problems within 10 or 15 minutes of that problem going down, if a website goes down, I detect that, and then I fix that, my CIO doesn't need to have a view that's red, because I'm not breaching my SLA. His view should only go red when his actual SLA is being breached, so when I have a number of them over a period of time. And that's a common mistake that people make. You've got to create the right views for the right people. I'm a strong believer that if you give people too much information, they ask too many questions. So I'm a big believer in making views as simple as possible. I only give people what they need to see. So that's the challenges that I try and fix in the environment. It's not always easy.
So that means that you're spending a lot of your time actually creating dashboards.
Absolutely.
All right. So let's go through this a little bit. So a couple of things we wanted to kind of drive. We're going to show you some new dashboarding methodology for Operations Manager 2012 in just a minute. But just as important as the customization of the dashboards themselves is how they're consumed. Gordon actually mentioned a couple different users earlier. We talked about the IT pro who's actually responsible for the service. We talked about the developer and their different view and their different monitoring needs. And oh, by the way, then there's the CIO and what he wants to see as well, or she. The challenge is that very often they also want to consume it through different devices. The IT pro might want to use the Operations Manager console. The developer might want to go to a web page on the back end of their particular site, and the CIO probably has a SharePoint portal they'd like to use. So not only are we talking about how do we customize the views, we also need to make sure of how they're actually going to consume them. So one of the driving factors in Ops 12 is to make sure that as you develop these new UIs, those same views are actually exposed in all the different consoles consistently. So here we can actually see the Operations Manager 12 console. This is what the web-based view looks like. Same kind of dashboard, same kind of experience, it's just a different way to consume it. Now again, you could actually use different dashboards and that way have different variables or different levels of depth. Similarly, by the way, for the CIO who wants to get it through a SharePoint portal, same experience. Same dashboarding across the view, it's just around how do I actually consume it. All right, now to really go through this though, let's go ahead and actually do a little bit of demo. Now, the dashboarding concept is actually not wholly manifested in this particular build. So we're going to start you off on live bits, and then we want to show you some conceptual screens that go along with that.
Okay.
So hold off for the mouse for just a second while everything syncs back up. All right, so now we're back in Operations Manager again, and we can see we've got actually quite a bit of environment. We've got some SQL, some Exchange, some SharePoint, some Data Protection Manager. Good job on that. So we've got a wide range of things which are being managed by our environment. Now let's go ahead and actually start with creating a new dashboard experience.
No problem. So, very similar to the way that you create dashboards today. You right-click in a folder or on the top level like I'm doing here, and you choose the dashboard view. Now, many of you that have played around with those dashboard views will be familiar. It's a couple of clicks, and you create some dashboards, and then you add some things. So we're introducing some new elements here. So first of all, I'm going to choose a dashboard template. So I've got a flow layout or grid layout. So I'm just going to
grid better.
Pick the grid one there. And I'm going to call this my Tech Ed dashboard. And
Very
again,
original.
according to best practice, I will create a brand new management pack for this. And I'm just going to skip that. And nobody follow me on that. Always create a new management pack. And then I've got the chance then to pick a number of different cells. So I'm going to choose 4 cells for this. And I'm going to go with, in fact, I'm going to go with a nice 4-1 in the middle there because I like that. It looks like my window at home. And I'm going to click on Create. And what that's actually going to do is create the base layer for my dashboard view. Now, there's a new term that you guys came up with, which I thought was genius, which starts with a W.
It's a widget.
It's a widget, you know. And
no one else has ever used that term.
Nobody else has ever used that before, yeah.
We're going to grab onto that. Yeah, so here's the idea. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to create this framework. And then after you've created the framework, now we're going to give you widgets. And these widgets are actually what you're going to use to actually fill in each of those panes. That's P-A-N-E-S, not P-A-I-N-S, in your framework that we have. So we'll go ahead and open that up. Take a look at, there's my Tech Ed dashboard. Go ahead and just click on it just so we can kind of see what that looks like. Now at this point, we can just click on each one of these and we'll actually see different widgets. Now, as I mentioned, we're not wholly there for CTP 3 that's there. We can see the first widget which is available, which is the alert widget. Go ahead and type something in. All right, so now we can actually just go and start to pick different objects that are there. So how about we grab some SQL servers? You want to just filter on SQL and then see what comes back? And how about we just grab all the SQL computers, anyone who's running SQL. And we'll say next. And then you can start to pick what kinds of errors are we going to look at for critical, warning, et cetera, which machines are flagged as for priority, and then also for different kinds of alerts for resolution. So, okay, now before you click next on this, remember that this is just one widget. It's the alert widget. That's right. So you could build different kinds, you'll have different widgets available to you as a library, and then from there you'll be able to pick different kinds of things. This is just one kind of behavior. Go ahead and click next. Now, this is actually going to take a little bit while. Oh, you have to pick your columns first.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have severity.
Severity, source, you're going to need a name.
Created. My favorite one, repeat count. And last modified. Let's have the owner in there and the priority, I think, as well.
All right.
And you can see here that I could also choose to sort those particular columns. You know, so I have a particular one at the top, or I can move them up or down. And then I'm just going to click Next and Create.
Now, this is going to take some time, but admittedly, when it comes back, the widget isn't entirely there yet. So we're going to see it by beta. It's just not in this particular build. All right. So we're going to start off with these dashboard views. So it's the idea of this being easy to create. You're using either the Windows-based view or the web-based view, and then you can actually customize it via the. Okay, all of these screens went away. Hold on for me 1 second. Because I think we're missing.
They're that new and on the edge. They've disappeared off your slide deck. Look.
I think someone got a little delete happy when they were reformatting things. So let me use my backup copy.
Yeah, while you're doing that, just to jump on the widget. So you saw earlier on the network dashboards, and we had some of the nice visualizations around network utilization. Well, that's a good example of the kind of widgets that will get delivered with the final version of the product.
All right, so a couple things to think about. So here's actually some conceptual views from one of our private builds as we're kind of framing this out. You can see here there's a long list of widgets that are available. Here's the punchline. Widgets can be part of a management pack. So you're not having to wait for new versions of Operations Manager to get new widget and template functionality. As new management packs come out, they'll have their own widgets as part of that experience. So you'll have different views that come out just as part of having the management packs be updated as well. So here we can actually see different kinds of widgets that are available around pie charts, around object state, state list, etc. Let me kind of go over here. And then you can actually start to see how they're going to get filled in. And when we get filled in, we get this preview, and we can actually do things like, okay, what kind of counters do we want to set for each one of those? Very similar to how he picked columns in his alert widget. You'll be able to pick different kinds of machines, so if you actually want to group machines from that. Again, this is all just customization that it's about 5 or 6 clicks to go through this. And when you're finished, it populates one screen. And then from there, as you continue to actually work through this, this is the end result. It's a fully customized dashboard, and then, oh, by the way, that dashboard is equally accessible, again, through the web-based UI, the Windows-based console, as well as through your SharePoint portal. And, oh, by the way, as you continue to make changes to these templates, those changes are manifested automatically. So you don't have to worry about creating this perfect dashboard and then accidentally breaking one little thing when you're making a change and everyone else having to pay for it. That's going to actually be permeated all the way through the process. All right. So let's kind of wrap it up. I think we got about 10 minutes left in our time. There we go. So hopefully some of the things that you took away today, there's a lot more to see. Some of the sessions that I'll list for you in just a minute of other places where you can go for more of the depth of material. But we wanted to give you the idea of what are the big things that are changing for Operations Manager 2012. It's, again, all around mean time to resolution and raising your visibility into your environment. So we're just completing SIM 355, which is the overview session. We actually were requested to actually do the session twice. So we're doing the session again on Wednesday. So if you have folks that, your peers that did not get a chance to do it today, you'll have another chance. And then we got 3 more sessions, one around just set up a config. We're going to talk about actually deploying Operations Manager 12, including upgrade scenarios from 07R2. We're going to talk about networking for quite a while. There's a lot of excitement around that. And then we're going to talk more about management packs and dashboards as well. And then if the AVCode application monitoring technologies are interesting to you, you have access to those as well. There's 3 more sessions just in AVCode alone that'll happen during this week. Hopefully some of the things that, that you'll want to go try out today that are available at Hands-On Labs. We've got 2 expo stations downstairs in the TLC and interactives. Okay, before folks leave, I want to make sure you're very aware of one more important factor. One of the things which we're launching, and actually enrollment starts happening today. So we're actually opening enrollment for Operations Manager 2012 Community Evaluation Program. So basically what this is that we're actually going to let you focus. When the public beta is imminent, we'll actually be announcing how you can actually participate in this. But basically the idea is that we as a community, up to about 400 to 500 folks, are intending to actually focus on one feature at a time for 2 weeks. So for 2 weeks, everybody's going to look at the networking feature. For 2 weeks, everyone's going to look at the application monitoring feature, and then dashboarding, and then the list just goes on and on. So we're actually going to have more of a moderated way, including access to MVPs like Gordon, as well as product team members as well. If you are interested, today is the very first day for enrollment for this. We wanted to save it for y'all at the Tech Ed audience. So you can send email to omcep@microsoft.com so you can get one of those slots. We are closing enrollment actually when we hit a certain number along the way.
So get in now.
Get in now. Free for everyone. All right, a couple last things. So for more resources on Operations Manager, the website, of course, is microsoft.com/opsmanager. The Tech Center also, technet.microsoft.com/opsmanager. Our forums, very active forum community, in part thanks to our MVPs. And then the team blog is blogs.technet.com/momteam. I already mentioned before, if you're interested in participating in the SEP, we want to make sure you have an opportunity to do that. Send an email to omcep@microsoft.com. And if you have questions for us that we don't get a chance to answer today, go ahead and send either email to me at jbuff, J-B-U-F-F, @microsoft.com, or you can send questions to Gordon as well, Gordon@inframon.com. All right, so with that, certainly there's lots of other track-based resources around cloud power, around private cloud. Certainly our big brothers over in Windows Server and Windows Azure. System Center is down there, as well as our forefront technologies for security as well. More resources from Tech Ed. And then, of course, you're going to want to make sure you fill out an evaluation so you can have your chance of winning an Xbox, a Kinect, some Windows mobile phones. I think those are actually speakers.
Are they?
But no one's actually been able to tell me that for sure, whether that's speakers and maybe it's a mouse, I don't know, and or a coffee cup. So with that, we're going to take a few questions, and then we'll be up here as we're tearing down for the next session. So thank you very much. I hope you have a great time at Tech Ed. Thank you.
Thank you.
So if you do have questions, it'd be great if you came to the mic just so we could record it for the folks at home. Or actually, you know what, it's a fairly long walk back. So instead, how about you come up to the front, and we'll take them from here.
From underneath the trees, we watch the sky, confusing stars, the satellites.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. All right, so the first question was around management packs. So one of the design goals in Operations Manager 12 is that anything which is a management pack for 2007 R2 will work out of the box with Ops 12. We actually have dedicated folks just around doing regression testing. So all the management packs and all the customizations and work that you've done, that should carry straight across. Okay, so the question is there, today AviCode is a full-blown standalone product. Technically though, to really appreciate it, you have to run it on top of an operations manager infrastructure. The question is, will it continue to be that way? So the primary design goal, and we're going to talk more about this as we get a little bit closer to beta, the primary design goal is to really fold as much of that into operations manager's standalone UI as possible. So in some cases, like the web pages, it might just be a rebranding. But as far as like, our design goal right now is to work our way down to one agent. It's to work down to one data warehouse and really simplify the infrastructure so you're not running two different infrastructures in parallel.
My last question is, so you have the management pack library. Will there be a widget library too that you're thinking about?
That's a great question. Will there be a widget library also? So all of that, and by the way, you should go out this week. If you haven't been out to Pinpoint in the last week, you should go and check because we just relaunched the Pinpoint service. And so now it has not only all the management packs, it also has all the integration packs from the Opalis Orchestrator family. It has the management stuff for Configuration Manager as well. And yes, so there's opportunities for not only for Microsoft, but also for ISV partners to deliver additional widgets as well as additional management packs. And all of that's going to be publicly exposed.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Hi.
Question. Now that you have the network monitoring, it's going to be able to do root cause analysis
Well,
Smart's customer right now. I know that Microsoft's supposed to replace some of the technology.
correct. Correct.
Is that what's going to be implemented in this version?
That's a great question for Rob. So Rob is actually doing that networking section. I have not gone to that yet. So hit Rob tomorrow for networking, but that's a good one for him. But yeah, Smarts is actually part of our enabling technology underneath. Hi.
Yeah.
Actually, it's like 5 clicks. So literally what happens is when you install your second management server into the experience, you'll have the option normally of saying which management group do you want it to be a part of. And you'll have there's a checkbox that says, would you like to actually add it to a management pool? And that's it.
Yeah. No, not at all.
There's no cluster role. It's more like having 2 web front ends to the same SQL database in the back end. They all have equal access to the data warehouse. They all have access to the database on the backside. So you're going to tell us which SQL servers to go to for those pieces, but then that checkbox inherits all the rest of the properties. It's a much cleaner way to do it.
And obviously you could scale that out across sites. You know, as long as they're in the same domain for that pool, you can have a couple of management servers in one site and a couple, and part of the same pool, and the devices can fail over accordingly. So it just takes away that big hardware capability on that. Yeah.
Agents, the pool is split.
Yeah.
The agent's going to go to the East Coast where they're supposed to, and only when nothing's available there end up on the West Coast.
That's another good Rob question. So Rob actually owns the setup and networking features, or excuse me, the setup and the upgrade scenario features for Ops 12, and he is actually flying in late this afternoon. So he's running the setup session and the networking session. That's a great one for him. He actually owns those bits.
Yeah, he's got a whole load of slides with those kind of scenarios on.
Yep.
So that's definitely one to sit in on, I think.
Absolutely. You're welcome.
Yeah.
So the management pack actually is AviCode. Right.
Yeah.
So when you install AviCode, what you're actually getting is you're getting the management packs installed into the Operation Manager environment, as well as the AviCode binaries, which needs to go on the production servers that are part of it. So Azure is different. So monitoring Azure actually doesn't use AviCode today.
Yeah.
Instead, it actually uses the Azure Management Pack, which is also available for Operations Manager.
Yeah. So that's just available off the Pinpoint catalog as well today.
Now, it is currently in a release candidate. It's not wholly shipping yet, but it is code and feature complete. So go take a look at the RC for the management pack as well. No, to get the AviCode software, you have use rights to it if you're already a System Center Suite customer, SMSD or SMSE. If you're not yet, but you still want to kind of kick the tires on it, you can just go out to Microsoft.com/AviCode.
Yeah.
And the trial
Simple
software is
as
right
that.
there, works for 6 months.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's a good long trial that you can get up and running with. No,
Not only that, but it's actually a great troubleshooting tool. I mean, if you
absolutely.
have anything from a SharePoint farm to that one app, which is a problem,
Yeah.
trial software works. Go get it.
Yeah. And you'll be blind. Everybody that I've deployed it for has got instant benefit from it. I mean, it's that good at pinpointing the problems in it, you know? Yeah.
Yep. That's what it's for. When you
Yeah.
go to the AviCode sessions later this week, I hope you'll go to at least the overview session. They'll do some of that same demo with a lot more richness on it. One of my favorite apps, which is currently being monitored by AviCode today, is Xbox Live. I'm a big gamer, and some of the dashboards that you can see in Xbox Live, what they'll do is they'll see these I/O rates, especially on login authentication, and every Tuesday afternoon, spike rates for authentication goes way, way up. Okay, any gamers in the, okay. What happens on Tuesdays? Why does that spike rate go up, at least in the United States?
Patch. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Patch Tuesday.
No. What happens with gaming that happens on Tuesdays? That's when the new titles come out. New games always release on Tuesdays for almost everything. So what happens is new game comes out, all the teenagers go out and get Call of Duty 12 or whatever, Halo 4 or whatever it is they're playing next, right? And all of a sudden authentication goes straight through the roof while they're doing matchmaking and new logins, right? So with AviCode, you could actually see those spikes. And then you can actually do some predictive modeling from that to make sure that you're actually going to stay within your SLAs for performance. Because bottom line, you buy this new $60 game, you power it up because you want to go and connect and start shooting your friends. If you can't log on, that's a pretty bad Tuesday, right? Yeah. So that kind of monitoring for,
and it does security.
It's a huge.
You
huge
can bet Sony aren't using AviCode. Put it that way. At the moment, maybe they should be.
I wish they were. I bet they wish they were.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions?
Yeah, do you have the improvements on the cross-platform management?
We do. So I'm trying to think if I have any subject matter experts that are here for that this week. You know what? One of the two devs is a cross-plat dev. So go down to the TLC area, look for the operations manager booth, and we've got a couple testers, and I believe one of them is actually from the cross-plat team. Yeah. So they'll be able to give you some good experience.
I think there's going to be obviously more platforms covered. And more the latest versions of the platforms, I think,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the plumbing is getting better for it too, right? So there's the features that you need to come in, and then there's also how you actually handle them. So with things like the server pool, you can see we're starting to make a better effort to be to take care of them as better citizens. So you have more resiliency. So you're not losing, you lose the management server, and all of a sudden all of those cross-plat machines go dark.
Yeah.
For storage?
Yeah.
Same idea. Anything which typically use a dedicated management server now uses that server pool. After that, now it's just a matter of how rich you can make the management pack, and that comes back to the original developer. Okay. So thanks for coming. All right, next question. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, now let's talk about that. Let's talk about it. So, and I don't want to steal all of Rob's thunder for tomorrow, but one of the things that he's going to talk to you about is why not to wait. Okay. So today, the scenarios they're working out right now in time for beta is that the Operations Manager 12 agent is multi-home. So you'll actually be able to deploy it on top of your existing machines, and what it'll do is it'll feed your new it'll feed your existing OPS 07 R2 environment and your new 12 environment in parallel. Yeah. So you can actually start to stand those up early. There's also a documented workflow that will come out by beta that actually talks about, okay, first you stand up the new agents, then you stand up, then you upgrade and place the management servers that are in a particular management group, and then lastly you step up the RMS. So I mean, there's kind of a flow to that.
It's like a functional.
Rob's going to actually talk through that during the setup and config talk. But a big part of the design goal for Ops 12 is reasons not to wait.
Yeah.
So.
And I think, just to touch on that, because it is a seamless upgrade to 2012, it shouldn't be a blocker for you getting up and running with OpsMgr, because you override any management pack customizations. Anything you do in OpsMgr today will be completely upgradable to the new platform as well.